Well, hello everyone. This is Alfredo Abate. If you don't know, I'm your current Chicago Oracle Users Group president, and welcome to today's webinar. As an attendee, you will be in, I think, listen-only mode, but maybe not in this case because of this platform. But we'd ask that you just keep your questions in the chat window, which we can monitor for you, and we'll try to answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording the presentation today, and we'll have that available in a couple days on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it at any time in case you miss anything. And of course, it's great to be here with you today virtually. And for those that are new to the Chicago Oracle Users Group, we welcome you. And traditionally, our group meets between 4 to 6 times a year in various locations around the Chicagoland suburbs, where we do presentations, hands-on workshops by a bunch of different Oracle experts, ACEs, and authors. And for the time being, we'll just continue with our virtual sessions until COVID restrictions have been lifted, which hopefully will be soon, because I would really love to see all of your smiling faces. And for those that don't know, our user group runs completely unfunded. We're one of the few Oracle user groups that operate in this manner. Our members do not pay any dues, and our meetings have always been free. You can join our mailing list on our website at coug.us so you don't miss out on any of our future events. But today, we're excited to have Oracle ACE Director Jim Sabrinsky as he takes us on a guided tour of the new Oracle Autonomous JSON Database. Jim, thank you again for presenting to our COUG friends. Let you take it over.
Okay. Thanks, Alfredo. And yeah, we normally meet. Yeah, normal is, there is no new normal, right? There's so many different ways, but we are definitely beginning to move towards some normality. In fact, I just today received a note from some of our colleagues in the UK saying that the UK OUG 21 meeting will be held in public with real live people. So I'm going to debate to possibly go see merry old England again this year, perhaps, if they'll have me. But I think call for papers for that, by the way, just opened in case any of you are interested in proceeding there. But today, we're not going to talk about England. We're going to be talking about JSON, a splash of soda and a SQL chaser. I hope that would, get someone's attention at least. We're going to talk about Autonomous JSON Database today. So let me just make sure that my sessions are still open, because I do have some cool code to share with you. Yes. Let me just make sure we're still logged in here. Good, we are. I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit in just a couple minutes how to use soda, which is part of our little joke here, and how to actually leverage that inside an autonomous JSON database. A little about me, if you aren't from Chicagoland area or it's the first time you're at a COUG meeting. Alfredo is responsible for, in my opinion, almost single-handedly resurrecting the COUG. I remember our very first meeting after resurrection, which was in a packed August, if I remember, June, July, August, conference room in a tower in Schaumburg when I was still teaching classes for Oracle University. And I think it was still then, if I recall. And it was a warm day, and we had about 40, 45 people stuck in that room. And ever since then, we've been trying to keep our meetings going. So I've been giving presentations for COUG for a long time, since the resurrection, if you will. I've also been an Oracle DBA for, 20 years. But lately, I've been doing a lot more work as a developer. Of the major presentations I'm doing this year, I think I've got 5 or 6. 4 of them are really focused on development, including Autonomous JSON Database. I'm an Oracle ACE Director, which gets me to a chance to present at a lot of conferences. Hopefully, I'll be able to do some more this year. We're ramping up for Kscope in less than a month. We start in almost 6 weeks from today, I think. Also, if you want to contact me, here's my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me on any of the things we're talking about here. And finally, one thing I did want to mention, I have a podcast, or I should say I'm a co-podcaster with my friend and colleague, Liran Amitzi. Liran is in Vancouver, British Columbia, but originally hails from Israel. So we have some very interesting talking points. We just did a really interesting podcast with our friend and colleague, Kellen Gorman, and we're in an arc right now where we're really talking about the diversity that we've all encountered within IT, and how diversity actually makes IT organizations stronger. We talk about tech, not at all. We'll really talk a lot more about the soft skills that underlie what it takes to become a success in IT, in our opinion. And we have a lot of fun doing it. I told Liren, the minute this stops becoming fun, I'm done. So let's talk about JSON. Let's talk a little bit more about where we're going in the world. And what's really going on these days, this is an interesting slide. I'll show you why in a second. We know that big data is simply everywhere, right? Between Hadoop, Node.js. I've only got to play with Node.js last summer for the first time. Loved it. MongoDB, right? All these kinds of things are here. The Internet of Things. I just built this past summer and fall, using a Raspberry Pi. Basically this is a cell phone. That's really what it is, if you look at it, right? We're on the Model 4 of the Raspberry Pi right now, which comes with 4 gigabytes of memory and all kinds of neat little features, right? And it's really at the heart of something called the Internet of Things, right? One of the reasons we went to IPv6 was to be able to handle something like 50 trillion devices that will someday be present in the Internet of Things, right? That's basically 2,000 devices for each human being alive today. And finally, semi-structured and unstructured data, like things from smart meters, right? I have a smart meter from Exelon at my house here, right? SCADA systems for handling things like pipelines and all kinds of things like that. That's been in the news recently, right? And images, right? Things like closed circuit TV. It's amazing how easy it is today to set up essentially your own home monitoring system. And these are the changes that are underway right now. Well, except for one thing. This is a slide from a presentation I did on JSON that's 6 years old. Literally almost 6 years old. I couldn't believe it when I pulled this up, right? Here's the real state of where we are today. JSON's everywhere. It is the standard for interchanging data between APIs and microservices. I did a presentation on IoT, I think just a few days ago. And one of the things we talked about in that presentation was almost everything uses JSON to exchange information, whether it's a stream like Oracle Streaming Service, or whether it's mapping, geolocation, uses GeoJSON natively, right? The new Apex native map region accepts as one of its 3 possible formats for geolocation information, either a longitude latitude pair, or an SDO geometry data type, or a GeoJSON document. And best of all, with JSON, right, which is JavaScript Object Notation, no need to consult a DBA. You can really build some complex data models and never have to worry about those foreign keys. And here I am channeling my old day, my old time. Yes, I'm old, I know that. Monty Python bit. We don't need to get the Gumby professors to tell us, the DBAs, that our data model works. So it's quite flexible. Let's take a look at what a typical JSON document looks like, right? So here's an example of one that we're going to look at in more detail. This is a JSON document, right? It opens with a left and right OG bracket, dark blue, right? We basically have string value pairs. And so I've got here something called an ID with some number attached to it, a first name, a last name, and so forth. And as we drill into this, there's also an array. You see that one called biodata? Yeah, and this has got information about somebody's blood type, possibly their gender, their preferred pronouns. And then deeper in, we've got another one called flight history. And this one has multiple string value pairs within an array. And so maybe this is a departing airport that someone's leaving from at a particular date and time, and the arrival airport, right? Again, it's not evident from here whether these are just random lists of flights that someone's taking, or whether this is a departure arrival record, if you will, right? But that's basically a JSON document. It's really, if you consider it to be an object, not too hard to understand. And that's the beauty of its flexibility. So here's one of the things that's really cool. Built into Oracle is something called SODA, Simple Oracle Document Access. So I'm going to go actually run through these examples here in real time. I'm going to show you how all this works. So I'm going to jump over here. I've logged into my Autonomous JSON database, by the way, unless I've been logged out here. Here it is. It's called AJD 21. Notice it is workload type JSON database. Notice I've also got a data warehouse and an autonomous transaction processing autonomous database out here. But right now I'm on AJD 21, and I'm going to use SODA, which is the Simple Oracle Document Access, to create a collection, a JSON collection. So it's going to be called aircraft. I'm going to execute this code real quickly, and you'll notice down here in script output, I've created a collection called aircraft. If I refresh, and by the way, I'm inside the Oracle Database Actions panel here, you'll notice that now I've got a collection called aircraft. Let me expand that, and notice it's got an ID, a created on, last modified version, and JSON document column. I'm going to list all collections that I've got inside this particular schema. Let me run that real quickly. And you can see there's another one out here called travel info. Huh, what does that look like? ID, created on, last modified version, JSON document. Yeah, this is also a JSON collection. I'm going to go back to my aircraft collection, and I'm going to run these 5 statements using SODA. And what this is going to do is add 5 JSON documents into my JSON collection. Huh, pretty cool. Where's your insert statement? Well, it's not really an insert statement. I'm using SODA to quickly add these documents into a JSON collection. Terminology is a little bit different, isn't it? Hey, can I report against stuff? Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm going to do a get of everything inside the aircraft collection filtered for a manufacturer named Boeing. Pretty standard, right? Boeing, we know there's all different types of aircraft manufacturers, Airbus, Bombardier, Beechcraft, right? Notice, by the way, that that filter is itself, I love this, a JSON document. So we use JSON to describe and access JSON. So let's run this real quickly and see what happens. And what I'm going to get back, if I remember correctly, are 2 rows, which by the way matches up perfectly here. And so here are the 2, I shouldn't say rows, I should say JSON documents, right? How about filtering based on a ceiling, the maximum ceiling of the aircraft? So let me run this guy. What I should see here is 4 rows back, 4 JSON documents containing ceilings of over 40,000 feet. Notice there's one for the Beechcraft Model 360ER that has 24,000 as its maximum ceiling. Hey, by the way, notice that I've got a couple of different things here. I've actually got a ceiling described. I've also got a max cargo capacity described for some of the documents. And I also have a biofuel capable flag only tagged on 2 of those documents. Interesting. Finally, if I wanted to, I could, or no, I can actually run a SQL statement. So let's run this one real quickly. Check this out. I don't have to use the SODA get commands. I can use SQL. That's what I love about JSON collections inside the AJD. It's really all built into the Oracle database engine. And so notice that I referenced ac.json.document.column name. Really, it's a key value pair. I'm referencing that key attribute for each one of these to produce a row or a record. basically, I should say, really a result set, right? So this is SOTA. This is what Oracle built for us. I'm going back to my preso real quickly. And again, if you just joined us, I'll take questions towards the end, okay? Because we do have quite a bit to cover. I already showed you how that worked, and I've showed you how this works too. We can use good old SQL. We sure can. And we can also use Node.js. We can use Python. We can use Java. We can use SOTA. We can use SQL. The best way to learn about this is go to the Oracle Autonomous JSON Database documentation, see Chapter 5. There are several examples of how to access information inside a JSON collection using all these different tools. But I wanted to give you a flavor of how SOTA actually works. It's essentially the interface, if you will, almost kind of like an API that we're going to use to get to whatever's inside our JSON collections. So let's move on a little bit into design. I had an interesting discussion with my colleague and friend, Nissen van Gerlikar, about, well, how would we do a data design for a JSON database, an AJD database for a document within it? Well, I know how I would do it inside RDBMS, right? Remember I had that flight history or really travel information JSON document example at the beginning of this? Well, if I was doing this traditionally, this is maybe how I'd break stuff out, right? I'd have something about a traveler. Who is the person that's traveling? Some information about their bio, right? And I might have these broken out into separate columns to store information about them. And finally, I'd have yet another table that would have, oh, okay, for this ID, this person's traveler, right, ID, at this travel time, took a flight from this airport. And maybe I'd have another column in there that said, you know, whether I departed or arrived, right? Perhaps I'd have that as well. You know, maybe I'd classify it this way. But you can do all of this inside a JSON document, as I already showed you. Underneath the covers for that collection, here's what it really builds. It's a table. It's a table. This JSON collection is really a table. It has an ID, a created on, last modified, and version column, and one column described as a JSON underscore document of type blob. In other versions of this, we'll get to that in a little bit, that JSON underscore document can actually be varchar 2, large varchar. It can be, if necessary. But in this implementation for AJD, it must be a blob. And here's the key point. It has a check constraint that checks to make sure that the document is a valid JSON document. And we use a special format called Oracle JSON or OSON. There's a reason for that. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Also note, this is stored as a lob named JSON document inside a table space as a secure file lob, which means it has security, right? Well, who cares about that? Personal information? I don't see any personal information. How about gender, right? These days, gender's a very carefully protected or considered thing, as well as blood type. Yeah, that might become important. That's technically personal identifying information, right? It's not HIPAA, by the way, because HIPAA has nothing to do with this. HIPAA only applies to medical providers and patients. So if you tell me your blood type, by the way, I haven't, I ask you your blood type, there's no HIPAA violation there, unless I'm your doctor. Okay, just by the way, that's an interesting little fact that I found out as I was looking up some things. So I want to build a really large JSON document. What I did is I grabbed my friend Dominic Giles' good old DataGenerator. You can get this directly from dominicgiles.com. He has a little tool here that is Java-based. He has a new one that I'm still experimenting with called Bench Builder, but still incorporates the elements of DataGenerator. And I built a 250,000, if I remember, no, 500,000 rows, 500,000 JSON documents using his technique. And what I did is generated to a file system a series of JSON documents, very similar to the traveler info example that I shared with you. By the way, this thing is so powerful, it was able to create 500,000 rows, JSON documents, in less than 2 seconds. That's how long it takes to build it, right? When I'm done with that, how do I get it up into a JSON collection? Well, here's the cool thing. DBMS Cloud, because we're all inside the cloud here, right? Once I specified a credential, I'm not going to talk to you about that right now. You have to do a little research on that. With DBMS Cloud, create a credential to get the right credential. I can now take that file that I uploaded into my object store on my OCI cloud environment, my object storage, right, as a file called travelerinfo.json, and said, here's the record delimiter, here's the format, it's basically a CSV format, and I was able to load 500,000 rows in less than 45 seconds into a collection. It basically loaded it directly into that collection named Traveler Info. And that introduces us into using DBMS Cloud and several other techniques that we're going to look at here for accessing or loading data, as well as another PL SQL procedure we're going to talk about in a second, DBMS SODA, that lets us do the same type of SODA stuff that we were doing natively at the terminal. By the way, when you use DBMS Cloud Copy Collection, much like an external table, when you build an external table inside the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, it will report back to you success or failure, and it will give you a table called copy $NN. Notice I'm up to 13 here. Yeah, I screwed up 12 times getting this to work the first time, as well as a bad table that'll say, hey, for whatever reason, I could not add this JSON document. Maybe its format's invalid, whatever, and that would be thrown in the bad file. In the log file, you will get, here's an example of the statistics that it actually shows. So that's a quick way to get data loaded inside a JSON collection in an AJD. Once I've got the data loaded, let me just wet my throat here for a minute. How can I see what's inside it? Well, I built that traveler info collection. If I use the JSON_serialize function and apply it to the JSON document column in the traveler info JSON collection, I can see the data as it's stored inside the JSON document. In other words, in native format. That's basically what I'm seeing. So this is very much like looking at the file, the document itself. So JSON Serialize is a great little tool. I think that's relatively recent, 18C, 19C, but you can use that to actually see what got stored out here. And by the way, this is all bogus data. It's fake data, right? I don't know that Freddie Dratch, Rachel Dratch's brother, I presume, actually really exists. It's just, you know, it's you know, just basically facetious data, if you will, structured data, you know, randomized data. How about using SQL to drill a little bit more into the bio data sub-collection, right? Because I can have object arrays inside a JSON document. So notice here I'm saying bio data asterisk in brackets dot blood type dot gender dot preferred pronouns as blood type, gender, pronouns. And I just said, hey, give me these 10 records with an ID between 1000 and 1010. And notice what it produces. It produces information directly from that JSON document. Oh, okay, that makes pretty good sense. Let's take another look at this. How about if we delve into the flight history object array, if you will, right? The sub collection inside this JSON document. So I basically specified, notice, flight history.airport as airports. We'll show you what that actually comes out as. Notice if I then say, hey, I want you to look at this subscript. And by the way, it's a subscript, not an index. So subscripts start at 0. Flight history 0.flight date as flight date underscore 0. Flight date 1, flight date 2 as flight record 2, right? Let's see what actually comes out. And I'm just doing it for 10 rows, 10 JSON documents. And notice that first off, flight record 3 always comes out as null. Well, that should be an error. No, you asked me for the second, not the 0th, not the first, flight record. There is no such thing. Null. And that's something to remember, right? You're not going to get an error out of this. It's not like if you ask for a column that didn't exist. You're simply going to get nothing, literally null back. Also note that airports, because I did not put any qualifier on which instance, or which I should say subscript to use, it returns the entire subcollection for each of these documents. So again, you can use SQL very effectively to peruse data inside this. I mentioned DBMS SOTA, by the way. So let's talk about how I could do that same SOTA stuff, but use PL SQL instead. Hey, I'm a DBA. I'm still a DBA. I'm a developer. I want to know how to do this using PL SQL. So DBMS SOTA has a function called drop collection. If I run this, it will drop the collection. What does that mean? It gets rid of the JSON itself, and it also the collection itself, and it drops the table underneath. So that drop table JSON.travelerinfo purge, don't need to do it. It basically will already drop the table. Creating a new collection inside an AJD, I can use the DBMS SOTA.create collection code to create that new collection. Notice there's a couple of other columns here, I should say parameters here, that I don't need to really fill out, because by default, I need to supply no additional metadata. If this was not an AJD instance, if this was an ATP instance, for example, and I was using DBMS SOTA inside it, I could actually specify different metadata. That's a slightly different topic for another presentation. What comes out of this? I end up with a table that has a JSON collection built inside it. I can also use DBMS SOTA to do many other things. So for example, I can reopen this collection. All I have to do is declare a data type inside an anonymous PL SQL block called SOCO of SOTA collection T type. Notice there's also a SOTA document T type as well that represents a JSON, really an OSON document type. So here I am opening that collection again, and now I'm going to insert one document using the insert one method. Notice I have to specify, here's the actual text here, right? Notice that I have to specify util raw.cast2raw to get that into a blob format so I can load it into the collection. So that's why that util raw cast2raw function is called. Okay, so I can't just access that in as raw text. Why? Because it's blob. It's a blob. It's really an OSON type of JSON document type, right? A JSON document type when I add this, right? I commit that record. Now, if I want to retrieve it, I'll show you how I'm going to do that in a second. Here, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to create a new one. I didn't specify the whole thing there, but I still have to call util raw.cast2raw to load in the document with ID 500,002. But I'm going to call the insert one and get function. That means, hey, go add it, but leave it inside that bucket, that collection called, what do I call it? Update SOCO doc. See that? So I inserted from there, and then I'm going to insert it and keep it inside that particular JSON document typed variable. Now I can get its key back. And this is something that's really cool. Every single JSON document that I load has, remember, there is essentially a created date, a version, a modified date, and there's also a UUID, a key. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. If I do the get on that, I can also, by the way, retrieve additional information and search with the find one function that's part of the DBMS SOTA PL SQL provided procedure, right? Notice I have to pass in the key. This time I'm actually retrieving it and just showing another example of how to do this into yet another JSON document typed variable called RTR underscore SOCODoc. I can get the key and all the other information from that particular document. What does this return? Well, let's take a look. Obviously, content's going to run off the page here, right? But notice the key, the creation timestamp, the last modified timestamp, and the version. Well, where did that all come from? The OSON document type controls all of that automatically for me, right? So again, that key, when I called get key, that's not the same thing as the ID of the JSON document. Remember, that ID is just part of a key value pair. These are automatically built whenever I'm creating a new JSON document inside a JSON collection. I can access them anytime I want to with the different get functions. So that's basically the elements of doing this. Again, if you wanted to actually do this, again, natively using PL SQL, right? And you may need to do that. Let's talk about some of the other things that are really cool here. I can build what's called a search index. Now, why do I want to build this? Got a great example coming up. Creating a search index for that JSON collection, traveler info, right, builds essentially a very wide-ranging index on everything inside the document itself. Also, there is another function called get data guide that lets me build what's called a data guide. And I'm going to output it using DBMS output here to show you what it looks like. And here's what it actually looks like. It's essentially just another JSON document. That's what I love about JSON. JSON is self-referential. You know, everything about it is referenced in JSON, even like I showed you, filtering and so forth. This essentially is a map so that when I need to figure out, how should I query a JSON collection, right? An OSON data type inside an AJD instance. This map makes it easier for Oracle to figure out how to leverage the search index to find data as quickly as possible. And I'll share that with you. I've got a great example coming up, as I already promised. So let's talk a little bit more about the real world here. Okay, JSON, wonderful, great. Well, what if I have real world data? So I'm going to build here real quickly a separate table called T_airports. This is a typical RDBMS table, right? Very typical. I've got a primary key on it. One key thing to notice, no pun intended, AP geolocation is of type STO geometry. I'll load some sample data. By the way, I'm also going to specify inside my AJD instance that the T_airports table has a column called AP geolocation that stores longitudes and latitudes. You'll see why that's important in a few more slides. And then I make sure that, by the way, I had a longitude and a latitude, a longitude. It's a combined column. No, I had two columns that had longitude and latitude. And now what this statement does is it says, I want you to build a spatial index on the STO geometry typed column called AP geolocation. Why? So that I can do other types of geocoding against it. And I'll share that with you in just a minute, how valuable this is. I create this spatial index of mdsys.spatial index v2 type, right? This is yet another type of index. It's not the same thing as a search index, but I'm going to use that so that I can play around with some geolocation stuff. And here's an example. So what I'm going to do is take that airports table and I'm going to join it twice to the traveler info JSON collection. Do you see that there? I'm actually joining it twice based on the airport code, what we call the IATA code, right? The International Air Traffic Association code, the 3-character abbreviation. I'm also going to grab the flight date from the JSON documents flight history subcollection and treat flight history 1, which is really the second date, and flight history 0, which is the first date, as if flight history 0 is the departure airport, right, and the departure date and time, and flight history 1 is the arrival date. I'm also going to use SDO distance to figure out, so how many miles did I travel? Might be kind of important whenever we get back to traveling again, right? Check this output. Now again, the arrival and depart times are randomly generated. Okay, I generated them based on just a randomized set of code. So again, the flight hours could vary wildly here, but notice that the miles flown is always exactly the same, just about 3,658 miles. Why is that? Because the distance between EWR and AMS, right, which is Newark and Schiphol, basically, is always the same. The flight hours may vary, right, depending on headwinds, tailwinds, delays, how many people had to be physically removed for not wearing a mask. It happens, right? What I'm sharing with you here is that I can take non-RDBMS tables, a JSON collection, and glue it together to a JSON collection and get data, meaningful data out of it right away. That's pretty cool stuff. Remember that search index? Let's take a look at that same query that I just shared with you. Add one more thing in, a passenger name. So what I'm going to end up in here is I'm going to add a new view called flight times and distances, including a passenger name. And I'm going to take this view so that we can do a typical search, right? Here's a typical thing that someone might get, right? A request from the TSA. You know, hey, I'm over at, you know, whatever it is, United Airlines. Hey, so-and-so, did so-and-so get on this plane in EWR and arrive at Schiphol? We need to know if this person's on this plane or they recently traveled, right? Could be TSA, could be Interpol, it could be anybody searching for this particular person. So what if we were searching for anybody named Horger, last name of Horger, who left Newark and arrived in either Frankfurt or Charles de Gaulle, right? Either arrived in Frankfurt or Paris, right? That's basically a typical query that I might execute against this. I'm not going to show you the output because it returns one row. Here's what I wanted to share with you. Take a look at that thing that's in the red box. Here's an example of how that search index comes into play. It basically said, oh, I get it. You want to search through all of the JSON documents in that particular query, or say in that particular collection via that query. And I want you to look for anybody whose last name was found within this path. So I want you to look for anything where the airports that you listed were either EWR, CDG, or FRA, and whose last name was Horger. That's what is really being shown here. That domain index is what's accessing that data. So again, this is an example of how that SDX, traveler info underscore SDX search domain index, when paired with the search capability of OSON. That's the whole point, by the way, of OSON. I have some great links on that. OSON is a very specific version of a JSON type document that, by the way, a very detailed white paper exists explaining why this version of JSON called OSON, Oracle JSON Data Type, has been built. And I'll share that with you in just a few minutes. But again, this is an example of where that search index comes into play. Ultimately, it's going to return we hope, one or more records, right? If that person flew on our airline. But that's an example of how this comes into play, okay? Now, here's some things to know about. An AJD instance is not the same thing as an ATP instance. There are some restrictions. And so here they are. For non-JSON data types, right? Why would I pick an AJD instance? Well, it's cheaper in cost, for one thing, versus an ATP instance. But if I have more than 20 gigabytes of non-JSON data, you got to go ahead and use an ATP instance. Also, if you had the desire to build a SOTA collection that does not contain JSON data, which you're permitted to do, by the way, you can do that. In AJD, you're locked into OSON. The default storage format in a SOTA collection for an AJD instance is only OSON, because again, the whole idea of an AJD instance is to get your JSON documents loaded up inside your AJD instance as quickly as possible and take advantage of all the features that OSON brings to bear. If you want to use non-OSON style JSON, then you're going to have to go with an ATP instance. Now, there's other things that are restricted, by the way, just like in a typical autonomous database, right? There are certain things that you can't do in an autonomous database. Check out Appendix A of this document called the Using Oracle Autonomous JSON Database. Check that document out for more detail. That's a working link, by the way. It'll take you right there. So let's say that you find out that your AJD database instance won't fill the bill anymore. You can promote your AJD instance to an ATP instance. So what I did here is I took my AJD 21 database and I created a clone. Wasn't that much data in it, didn't take that long to clone. I took it as a full backup of my database, my AJD instance, right? Except I called it AJD 21 promo, for promotion. I created administrator credentials. I specified all these different parameters and setups. In about 3 minutes, the cloning completed. And then I said, take that AJD 21 AJD instance, AJD 21 promo instance, I should say, and I want you to make it into an ATP instance. When was the last time your Oracle sales rep said, by the way, this is going to cost you more? Right? Usually that's the last time we hear about it. That's one of the things I really like about the cloud, right? Is that this is all up front. It goes, hey, number one, you do this, there's no going back. And also, you're going to start paying for OCPU per hour, and you're going to pay for Exadata storage, because that's how ATP works. Are you sure? I said, sure, convert. And no kidding, in less than 2 minutes, I had my new ATP instance. Now remember, the reasons to convert I had in that one slide, right? And by the way, you're going to get this presentation. I've given it over to Alfredo already, and we're going to record this. So if you need to go back through this, you can obviously look at this, right? Anyway, why would I consider AJD over something like MongoDB? Now, these are not my numbers. Beta Hammerschmidt, who is an Oracle product manager, did a really great blog post on this, and I just grabbed some of this information from his blog post comparing AJD to MongoDB Atlas, which is their workhorse for JSON documents. There's some pretty compelling factors here, especially the thing that you can do SQL access over JSON documents. And last time I checked, if you're a DBA or a developer, let's be honest, if you're a DBA, you're already a developer, you just don't know it yet. If you're a developer and you're used to using SQL, you don't have to rewrite anything to use an AJD. And there's that other little factor of it's over $1.20 cheaper. Those are Beta's numbers, not mine. Okay, I haven't measured this, but there's some compelling factors here. And this is all part of this idea of the converged database, right? One data engine, one database engine to really bring everything together. I did a presentation at InSync 21 on the converged database. We're going to have a converged database panel as part of CaseScope 21 in about 5 weeks. this is what seems to be making sense, right? Do you bolt things on? Do you buy MongoDB Atlas and then bolt something else on? Extra money. Do you bolt something else onto that? Extra money. Or do you just go with one? Which, by the way, you're already using because you're an autonomous database shop or an Oracle shop. So that's basically my presentation. There are some really neat stuff. This last set of bullet points here, I should say, links, I mean to say, the Autonomous JSON Database under the covers, that OSON format. There's a nice little blog there, but there's also, if you go out to vldb.org, the folks that actually wrote OSON have an extremely deep discussion on why OSON works so much faster, especially for searching volumes, huge volumes of JSON documents. The blog post is a simplified version of that, right? So do take a look at that. If you decide you want to play more with SODA, here's a whole bunch of links that you can leverage to your benefit to actually see the advantages of it. And that's all I had for right now. Let's see if we got the questions. Let's see if I got any questions here. Let's see, we got a couple of hellos from Alfredo. Anybody else? Questions? We got a good crowd here, about 12 or 13 people. Anybody at all? Anybody want to talk about the price of lumber? It's Alfredo and I were doing. I believe lumber will be the new cryptocurrency based on prices.
Yeah, it sure seems like it.
Yeah. Go price out a 2x4 at your local Home Depot or Menards, and you'll see why. What were we saying? $11 for a 2x4 that normally costs $1.48? Yeah, it's the new cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it's insane.
Seriously, folks, any questions? Okay. Everybody understood everything perfectly. Great. Glad to hear it.
It was a lot. I will say it was a lot to take in. It was very interesting.
Yes.
Obviously opens up some new opportunities for us in the Oracle world to leverage JSON even more. So,
right.
But there was a lot there. I will say that. I mean, a lot of it was very foreign to myself. I don't know how others feel on the call today, but for sure. Definitely something we can use over and over again to review, which is really quite nice.
Right. And I'm probably going to be working on an article on this for Taxeleration, part of the ODTUG database community, platform database community, however you want to say it. So some interesting stuff there as well. There's a lot of good blog posts on this, by the way, too, and I had several links here. The documentation is actually quite good. The documentation is pretty good. There's a little bit of work they got to do on DBMS SODA, but I've made them aware. Yeah, this seems to me to be the future. Anybody have any questions? Otherwise, I guess we can kind of wrap up here, and I'll make the recording available to Alfredo shortly.
Yeah, and we will get it posted on our YouTube channel, which you can get to, and we'll put the presentation itself on our website. One little note for folks that I want to let people know is that we are moving our website from one hosting platform to another, probably this weekend. So you may see some minor outages. I don't think people are typically going on the COUG website on Saturday evenings. So, but if you see that, just keep that in mind. We are doing that.
And do you have a presentation coming up in the next couple of weeks again, Alfredo? I'm trying to remember.
So that's the other thing I was going to mention was we are working on a possible presentation for June. But if we don't get one in time, we do be on the lookout for the annual Midwest Oracle User Group and Chicago Oracle User Group combined training day, which it looks like is going to be in July. They're finalizing on some dates. It will be virtual still, so we're still kind of in that mode. But I'm sure it's going to be, we're going to have a bunch of really great presentations, speakers for us. So look forward, stay tuned to that. And if you haven't, like I said before, gotten on our mailing list, you can do so from the COUG.us website. That way you don't miss out on any announcements, even though we do post on social media like LinkedIn and Twitter, but that's usually the best ways to get on our mailing list. And I don't send out a whole lot of mail. There's no spam on there. You probably get maybe one or two emails a month. It's not much.
Right. Excellent. Thanks for the pitch for that. And folks, don't forget, Kscope 21 is right around the corner. And let me tell you, even though it's going to be virtual, and I know you're zoomed out, we're going to have a heck of a lot of fun. We have some really great presentations coming up. There's symposium days, the first day, but we have some amazingly fun stuff, and not just for old farts like me. We've got some really great millennial content coming up. Just wait till you see. So with that, I guess we'll sign off, Alfredo, shall we?
Yeah. Thank you so much again, Jim, for presenting to us.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Thanks everyone for coming. Stay safe, stay strong. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.